Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Epstein. I'm the marketing specialist here with TDA Perks. Welcome to today's webinar, COVID-friendly credit card payments, presented by Phil Nieto with Perks partner BestCard. So among COVID-friendly type processing payments, Phil will also share useful tips for staff on minimizing card processing costs, as well as clarify processing fees so you can determine if you're paying your provider too much. Before we begin, I want to let everyone know that TDA Perks offers 25 different vendors. They're all endorsed by TDA members to support your practice. We also provide several different resources, such as our educational articles, our podcast, and recorded webinars. And we keep that all on the TDA Perks website, which is tdaperks.com. Again, my name is Josh Epstein. You can reach me via email at jepstein@tda.org or call the TDA 512-443-3675, extension 161. Phil, are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready to go. Well, Josh, thank you very much for the introduction. Today, we're really going to cover how COVID has really changed getting paid in the office. As part of that, BestCard has been a TDA Perks partner for years. The other thing about BestCard that a lot of people may not realize is that we were originally created as an in-house program of the Colorado Dental Association. So really, the goal was always help members have consistently lower cost, better customer service, and really just find a reliable partner in credit card processing that can be a really confusing field. BestCard is endorsed by TDA Perks and 41 other state dental associations. We're also endorsed by the American Dental Association's Member Advantage program. As part of that, we really work with thousands of dental offices around the country. And to that end, we put together really specific dental payment software and technology that our merchants use. So as we approach this, we really have a good idea of what dental practices are doing in the office and what might have changed with COVID. So as we kind of jump to that, there's a bunch of challenges that COVID has kind of introduced that dental offices really weren't having to think about back in 2019. First, offices really have to try to reimagine ways to take payments while minimizing face-to-face time with a patient. You don't want patients congregating in one section of the office. And really, for the health of staff, you want to keep as much distance as possible. If you look actually at surveys, so this actually comes from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, from March 10th to June 30th, 2020, 63% of basically people that responded to the survey had not made a single in-person payment during that time period. Obviously, dental offices closed for a majority of the end of March and April, but even afterwards, there was a trailing effect where people weren't wanting to be in office making payments. And really, for a lot of dental offices, what they saw was that more patients were avoiding using cash, and that basically when they were avoiding using cash, they were paying on a debit or credit card. So that is actually kind of just speeding up a trend that has already been happening in the credit card processing industry, specifically in the dental industry in the last couple of years. We've published articles before, but one of the things that we had seen is that basically back in 2009, dentists were taking about 68% less payments via credit card than they were in 2019. That is really something, anytime parts of your business are growing, it's really worth taking a look and making sure, hey, is this meeting the needs of my bottom line, or are we doing it the smartest way? The other big challenge with COVID is basically a lot of dental offices have had to reevaluate their costs because they're running on tighter margins. This is actually from the ADA's Health Policy Institute, looking at dentists reporting how busy they were prior to COVID versus, as week by week went by. I mean, as you can see, early in March, the vast majority of offices were closed and only seeing emergency patients, if that. As we've gotten further along, things have gone back to normal, but as of July 27th, the most recent week that they had survey information available for, that's still 55% of offices that aren't running at full capacity with lower patient volume. That is obviously, that's a pinch point on your business. It's something you have to make sure you're making sure that you're meeting that bottom line need to keep your business operating. So with all of those changes in how patients want to pay and how often they're doing face-to-face transactions, there's a lot of different challenges that have really come along how the office themselves can accept payments. There are a lot of different payment methods out there. We'll go through a bunch of those, but you want to make sure that you're able to do it at a reasonable cost. The other thing is that there are really truly legitimate security concerns with a lot of payment options, such as website payments. Usually there's really good answers as to why it's secure, but it's a good thing to be thinking about. There are HIPAA concerns depending on what information you have to put out there. And last, credit card processing can be a confusing industry. There's a lot of insular terminology that, most people never think about how their credit card gets run. I'll try to kind of break that down a little bit and explain it just in a lot more common sense language. So really, what we're trying to do with the changes that COVID has kind of inflicted on dental offices is three things. First, minimize costs. Two, you want to maximize the options that payments have to pay their bill. Really, at the end of the day, the easier and the faster you can get paid, the happier everyone is. And then last, there's really a push to minimize contact while accepting that payment. So the good news is that some of these pieces are probably already in your office. As you can see, contactless payments are something that is very common, but the credit card terminals that you already use, there's a good likelihood that that's already accepted. So in 2015, there was a move in credit cards to accept chip card payments. Most offices have since switched to being able to have a card reader that accepts those chip cards. But what a lot of offices might not realize is that that same card reader that accepts chip cards usually also can take contactless payments. Now, contactless payments come in two different types. So basically, there's either a card that is set up with a chip that can basically, as soon as it gets close to the terminal, finalize the transaction. The other way that's also very, very common is people that have saved cards to their smartphones can hold the smartphone up over the device. So essentially, while the physical capability to read those contactless payments is usually present on the terminal, and we'll actually go through how you can check, there's a software component that the software on the terminal also has to have contactless payments enabled. So for an office, if you were to see this symbol on either a credit card or on your terminal, that generally means that you'll be able to accept a contactless payment. That usually shows up on the screen on a credit card terminal, so it's not something you should really have to look for. But you can also test it yourself by putting in an amount on the device, or if you use a card reader that attaches to your computer system, putting in an amount and then pushing it through to the card reader. If you were to hold up a smartphone over it, that's really all you have to do. Hold up the phone over the device. If it's a phone itself, it'll have the person go through biometrics, so either putting in their fingerprint or having it scan their face. But then no contact, it'll finish the transaction. Some phones will have you basically put the phone back afterwards to kind of finalize it. But it really is a very simple, very easy process. Because of that, a lot of offices are choosing to put their card readers in a more patient accessible place. So having something that has a component for your staff and then a component for the card holders to each interact with so that they're not touching the same screen can also be really helpful. But that is something that is already in your office. Now, with contactless payments, really the next questions that we always get is, does it cost me more to run it that way? And the good news answer is no. So essentially, every time a card is present, whether it's swiping a card using a chip, or if you're using that contactless reader, the terminal knows that the card is present, and you get the lowest possible rate for that type of card because there's lower risk of fraud since the card is there physically, right near the reader. Now, that kind of is separate from card not present options. So that could be when a patient calls or mails in a payment, website payments that a processor can set up for you, card vault solutions that will store a card for a patient. Those usually run at slightly higher rates because the card isn't present. Now, there's some things that you can do to actually help with that. But overall, it's good to know that accepting payments in the office with the card present, even if it's contactless, will generally help keep your bottom line as low as possible. Last, contactless payments are really, really secure. They use the same technology that chips do, where they have a one-time use token. So essentially, if somebody were to try to steal a contactless card, well, they would use it one time before it wouldn't match the token that's supposed to be on file for the real card holder. So that is something that you can do really without much concern. That is something that terminals do in a very secure way. So we just went through that, sorry. So thinking outside of the office. Basically, in office, there's a lot of easy steps to get them to pay and kind of make it safer. But outside the office, That's where a lot of dentists don't really know what options are available and what they should cost. We're going to go over website payments. We're going to go over recurring payments, text to pay options where you can text an invoice to a patient's phone and they can basically pay through that link. And then card vaults, where basically you can store a card on file for a patient. Each of those has, opportunities and benefits. There's also a couple things to know before implementing them to make sure that you're doing it in a, thoughtful way. The good news is website payments should be very easy to implement. Many card processors use secure gateways to basically host secure payment like pages. So the nice thing about this is when an office gets a website payment set up, usually that payment is not run through your website. Your website doesn't collect any of the sensitive card data. It doesn't store it or transmit it. Like for BestCard, we all the time will set up payment pages for offices where essentially they can, post a link, pay online or pay now. Post that link on their website. They click through. It still looks like the office's, regular website, but the benefit is all of that secure information is being handled on our secure gateway. So your website doesn't touch any of the card info. Even if you were to have, a thorough hack where they had access to everything, there's no credit card information to be stolen, right? Because it's just a simple link to a secure page that's usually very easy to set up. And we all, like credit card processors, all use PCI approved solutions from secure gateways. So even our staff at BestCard doesn't have access to the credit card information that's running through the website. We can see redacted information, but that's really all that we need or your staff needs to do their jobs. We don't have access to full credit card numbers. Now, website payments, there's a couple things to always be aware of. When you're accepting those, they always count as card not present payments. So the cost is slightly higher, and if you wanted to have an exact number, it changes depending on the type of card. But in general, it's about 0.3% more to run a card not present payment than a card present. Now that means for every $10,000, that's costing you about $30 more. It's an incidental charge, but it is something to kind of be aware of if you're trying to keep your fees as low as possible. Two, website payments really have a couple of different ways that processors can do them. With BestCard, we do a simple website where basically the customer will put in their own information and put in the amount that they want to pay. We don't provide basically any patient or treatment information on our pages, really to make sure that we have as little to worry about in HIPAA compliance as possible. If your website is basically saying, all right, here was the treatment and here's what you're being billed for, you need to implement like a two-factor security piece where they have to log in with a username and password. Otherwise, you're putting out HIPAA information in a way that could be viewable to others, and that's really something that you always want to avoid. Last, when you're setting up website payments, you can always feel free to ask for the PCI certification information. Basically, just verify on your own that, yeah, this is already an approved solution. And really, like I said, that way you make sure that the card information, even if it's not being hosted by your website, it's still secure because no one wants to go back to patients saying that there's been a breach of their card information. One little tip that I would also recommend, if you're not using BestCard, because we do this automatically for all of our dental offices, but make sure that they're implementing some common sense security features. It has happened where offices have had their website used to run thousands of fraudulent cards, trying to basically see which cards are legitimate so then they can use them fraudulently. Really, at the end of the day, there's really simple solutions to make sure that that is not something that can happen, or at least not happen in any significant capacity. Like BestCard, we set it up where after 3 declined transactions inside of 20 minutes, the website basically will shut down until we reactivate it. Those are really easy solutions, but a lot of times payment processors don't always think through all of the applications of setting up those website payments. Next, as far as recurring payments, this is something that we've seen a lot of interest in with COVID because patients are also feeling the financial pressure of COVID and sometimes having the option to either set up, installment payments, or offices are also finding a lot of success with setting up their own in-house membership plans. That is something that is fully supported on our system. It's really easy to set up, and really it gives you a lot more flexibility in making sure that you can get paid and can offer patients the care that they need. Essentially with recurring payments, what it does is it will store the card information securely, and then essentially from there, after that first transaction, it uses a card token. So it's no longer even using the full card information to run the transaction. So for example, you can set up patients so that they're paying, $250 a month on really any day of the month. But like if you wanted to always run it, all right, $250 run on the 15th, and we're going to charge that for 6 months until they pay off their bill. That's something you set up one time, and it can take care of that automatically. We also have, like, if you're using like the in-house membership plans, people that have, maybe like an upfront payment to sign up, and then they pay $40 a month going forward for every month, and in return they get discount services. That is really, really a very popular way to try to build your patient book of business, especially because it helps reach out to, patients that might not be your normal person that comes in for a tooth cleaning because they don't have dental insurance. Giving them a better standard of care while also, doing it at a lower price for them, but a better price than you would normally get through like remittance from insurance. Last, with things to be aware of, you really want to be careful that you always get a payment agreement form signed where the patient agrees to the recurring payments. That is something that we built into our software. But if you don't have that, you can have a patient, basically dispute all of those charges. So you always want to have a signed agreement form where they basically acknowledge, here's the structure of how those recurring payments are going to run. Last, and I have seen this way more than I like to admit, you want to be really careful about never keeping full credit card numbers. And basically unlocked physical media. So if you have the card numbers written down, that should be locked up. And honestly, even then, there's usually better methods to store that card information, like our secure gateway. And if you're storing it digitally, you never, ever want to have it in an unencrypted format. I've seen many, many times where an office has an Excel document that anyone in the office can log into that has hundreds of credit card numbers. Really, as far as just liability, and making sure that things are happening in a secure way, that is one of those big no-nos that, unfortunately, like I said, we see fairly often, but it's very easy to work around. Now, piggybacking off of the website payments, one of the very popular options is text to pay, where basically you can text an invoice to a patient. They can click a link from that text message and then pay their bill online. So that link basically links back to the website payment that we have set up. It usually uses a token so that, all right, this is a bill for $70. Doesn't provide any other patient information except for first name. And that is one of those things that we are in the final stages of certification to offer. So like in-house, we use it already, but offering it to other dental offices, we plan to be doing that by the end of this quarter, which is coming up very soon. With text to pay, there's a couple things you want to make sure of, and the biggest one is, one, verifying the phone number. You don't want to text a link to somebody that's not expecting it. But two, to make sure that you have a HIPAA waiver on file, signed by the patient, basically saying that they are okay with you texting them. Once again, this is something that our solution incorporates natively, but if yours doesn't, that is something that you'll want to have on your own. Last, and kind of cool, are secure card vaults. So basically, what a secure card vault will do is allow you to accept a payment one time and then store that card for future use. It does it with a payment token, just like the recurring payments. So your staff will not have access to the full credit card number, but they'll be able to run that card for, normally the way it's written is like a balance of payments after insurance remittance. That is something that has gotten very, very popular because that really lets a patient pay one time and not have to be in person to pay again, not have to worry about standing, close to other people while making that payment at the front desk. You should know that those cards run as card not present. So it does run at that slightly higher rate because the card won't be physically present for the transaction. And you want to, similar to the others, you want to have a card on file agreement with patients just to avoid disputed charges and make sure that they understand when those charges are coming through via notifications so that they're not surprised by something on their bank statement that they don't think that they agreed to. Now last, with implementing all of these, we always want to make sure we look at the bottom line because there are a lot of great solutions, but there are a lot of companies that really will charge an arm and a leg for something that doesn't have to cost that much more. The COVID pressure that has been created for dental offices. I mean, I talk to dental offices every day. Every dentist I talk to, They're doing more work with less staff time, trying to basically, balance spending more on PPE while also seeing fewer patients than they did in 2019 because of the relatively strict cleaning procedures they have to do to make sure that the office is sterile. With that, credit card processing fees generally are one of the more significant business costs on a month-to-month basis. Usually you have everything relating to your employees, equipment, and whether you're paying rent or a mortgage. And after that, credit card processing fees might be, the very next fee as far as what you're paying every month. The fees in general tend to be very, very detailed and obscure and honestly just confusing. Most dentists I know would rather be doing dental work. They don't want to dive into the details of the 1,200 different cards accepted in the U.S. and what those each should cost. The biggest thing is that there's no free lunch. I've seen credit card processors make statements that honestly BestCard would never make as far as only 1% to run cards. Well, those are very particular cards, and we'll dive into that. But really at the end of the day, every credit card processor has the same costs. There's really no one that gets a better deal, even though they might claim that. So at the end of the day, what you pay could vary greatly depending on your processor, even if you think you're getting a great deal. So I'm going to use a real example from a Texas dental practice that we spoke to earlier this week. So this was a very successful practice. They were running more than $200,000 in credit card payments per month. They had been told by their processor when they signed up just a couple months before that all cards would run at a rate of 1.59% and 5 cents per transaction. Well, when they looked at their actual bill, they were surprised because the total cost was more than $7,000. If you do the math, working backwards from that with the $7,000 plus paid on what they ran in cards, they were basically paying 3.65% or $3.65 for every $100,000 they run in payments. That's a lot more than what they've been promised at 1.59. Well, it turned out that the rate that their processor had quoted was a qualified rate that really didn't apply to very many of their cards. So more than 70% of their payments were running at a non-qualified rate of 3.95%. The question, that most dentists then ask is, well, who decides what's a qualified versus non-qualified card? A lot of processors do that differently, and honestly, that is one of the pricing methods that we tend to, recommend you don't go for because the capability to have such higher costs is so clear. So this office, we actually ended up saving more than $37,000 per year by switching to us. And really, this is something that you can do easily in the office on your own. So what we like to look at is not any particular rate or any particular fee, but really if you're trying to get an idea of how much you're paying, look at all of them together. So if you paid $535 to process $25,350 in fees, you do the math, that comes out to 2.11%, right? Simply translated over, it costs you $2.11 to process $100. What we like about the effective rate is you can't really hide any numbers in there. If that's a fee that you're paying, great. You add it all together and then figure out as a percentage of all your sales, what did it cost you? So for that previous office, that 1.59% that they've been quoted, well, obviously, because they're paying more than 3%, it was quite a bit more than that. Something was being added somewhere. Even if you don't have the expertise to break it down bit by bit, you can definitely do the math and say, all right, this just seems way higher than what I was promised. The other thing with the effective rate is that, like I said, it will change a lot between processors, but it'll also fluctuate a little bit in your office month to month because you generally are taking different credit cards, and there's a wide range in what credit card processing fees can cost. So to kind of dive into that, here is the 30-second breakdown of how credit card processing fees work. Every time you run a card, or any business in the U.S. runs a card, there is a direct rate depending on the type of card and how it was processed that BestCard or any other processor would pay to Visa or MasterCard or whoever issued the card. This rate is known as interchange, and really there's no getting around interchange. So I see credit card processors claim all the time wholesale rates or medical rates. There's really no such thing in the industry. All processors pay that same amount to the card processor. It's what we charge on top of that where we compete against other companies. Now, a lot of credit card processors have extra fees that they'll add in on there. Some of them are legitimate. Like, we pay a fee to our back-end clearinghouse for every live account. We pay a fee for the IRS reporting that we're mandated to do under the Patriot Act. We pay a fee for Gateway and PCI. But sometimes processors add in a bunch of extra fees. You might see like a risk assessment fee. Well, that's a fee that the processor is implementing on their own side, not really a direct fee that is actually being charged to them. When you do that effective rate, like I said, it helps kind of push through the individual numbers. But when we do a cost comparison, we really look closely at every single one of those individual numbers and making sure, hey, is this a real fee or is this a fake fee? Sometimes processors will also have like surcharges on top of real fees, so they're not passing it through at the real cost. Sometimes they'll have extra fees that don't even make it onto your monthly statement, but are charged directly to your bank account. So when you look at what you're paying, you want to make sure you're thorough. If there's a lease that you're paying for elsewhere, you want to make sure that you're kind of calculating that into your costs. Now, if you want to know what the average dental office pays, basically we can break that down really, really simply. So we do thousands of comparisons for dental offices per year. I think this year we're at 2,200. In our comparisons, we basically look at what is an office actually paying and then what would they be paying with us. From our comparisons, the average dental office is paying 3.15%. So think $3.15 for every $100 running cards. Obviously, there's a lot of range there. I mean, I talk to offices all the time that unfortunately are paying 6 to 10% because their credit card processor has raised their rates consistently to where the costs are much higher than what they originally signed on for. With BestCard, because we have guaranteed pricing that we offer all TDA members, our average is 2.14%. Now, with those costs that vary from processor to processor, really, truly, a good thing to know is at the end of the day, whether your processor is charging too much is something that you can really only tell by doing a detailed breakdown. I mean, on the same pricing we offer all TDA members, I have offices whose effective rate is 1.3% because they take a large percentage of debit cards. And we'll actually dive into some of those tips that you can really follow in the office on the next slide. But, you might have a good effective rate and there might still be savings there. You might have a really high effective rate and be taking a lot of high-end cards. Really, if you're not in the 2.1 to 2.3% range, I really recommend taking a close look at what other processors can do to maybe save you money. Now, in that vein, we do have our 7 tips that any dental office can follow to help lower your costs. So these are steps that in the office, you can train staff, hey, this is a good thing to do, and really can make a big difference in what you pay at the end of the month. Now, if you're working with a credit card processor that doesn't pass through those lower costs to you in like their fee structure, it's not going to help as much as it should, but these are still things to know are kind of best practices to always follow. So first, debit cards are your best friend as a business owner. Anytime a patient uses a debit card, even if your staff or the patient don't even know it's a debit card, there's a lower rate for that card than what you get on a credit card. The reason for that is really simple. Debit cards, there's no perks, there's no rewards. The risk is lower because if the money's not in the account, the transaction is simply not going to process. With credit cards, there's the risk that, the patient isn't going to pay their bill at the end of the month. There's the perks and rewards that are being charged. Those are things that factor into why the rate is higher for credit than debit. So like a debit card from a big bank, just to give you an example, would run at a rate of 0.05% and 22 cents per transaction. That's the interchange that every credit card processor would pay. Just to give you the easy math, a $10,000 sale would cost you, the business owner, $5.22. Now that is specifically a debit card where you're not using the PIN. That's just running it just like you would any other card. But your credit card processor may not be passing through that lower debit rate. With BestCard's pricing, we do. But if your processor charges the same for debit as credit, even though the terminal knows it's a debit card, they're the ones making a lot more money on that transaction rather than you saving money. The best advice I can give any office is train your front staff to say, hey, do you have a debit card you'd like to pay with today? If the person says no and decides to pay with a credit card, totally fine. But if you get even like 10% of people to choose to pay with a debit card, you're going to see a really notable difference in what you're paying every month. 2, card present transactions. Once again, that's if they use a chip, if the card is swiped, or those contactless payments. Those are always cheaper than a card not present, where you're keying in the card, or it's on a website, or you have the card on file. Really, truly, the offices that consistently have the lowest costs are the ones that try to get payment the day of service in the office. And that is something, like I said, there's a lot of options how to do that, even to make it COVID friendly with as minimal contact as possible. 3, if the card isn't present and you're keying in that transaction, whether it's keying it in yourself, having them enter it on a website, or having your staff run it from a customer vault, that is something that you always want to make sure that they put in the address and zip code numerical numbers for a lower rate. So for example, if the customer's card, they were at 1234 Fake Street, all you need to type in is 1234 and the zip code. But if that matches the cardholder's information on file, you get a lower rate on that not present transaction because there's lower risk of fraud. So that is something that there are extra transaction fees if that information isn't put on, and it's really easy to avoid. The other big benefit there is if you ever had a patient dispute a charge saying that it was a fraudulent charge, that actually helps you win that dispute and make sure that you keep the money that you basically were charged for the transaction. 4, you should know that rewards cards are always more expensive to process because it is the office paying for the reward. I have the American Dental Association card, and it's great, and I love it because I get great perks back. But at the end of the day, that card, when I run it at any merchant, whether it's Walmart or anyone else, always will have a higher rate than other card types with, less perks, or debit cards, especially where there aren't any perks. So it's kind of just something, obviously, anytime a patient wants to pay, you have to accept any card that they offer to pay with. But if you can really key them towards, hey, do you have a debit card you'd like to pay with today? That really makes a big difference. To give you an idea, an average reward card might run at 2 to 2.3%. So whereas that debit card ran at 0.05%, for a $10,000 transaction, that's the difference of paying $5 to run the card versus $230. It really is a big difference. Now that gets even worse. Insurance payments that are issued via virtual credit cards tend to be the most expensive cards that you're going to accept. Those are high-end corporate rewards cards that have great perks. That is why in the last couple of years, they've switched to to issuing those cards rather than issuing a check or doing a direct deposit to a bank account. Some of these cards run higher than 3%, and that is a hard cost. So, no one's going to be able to get you a better deal on those, but what you can do is reach out to insurance providers and request either checks or direct deposits. That should cost as little as 35 cents per payment, and really that can be a huge difference in what you pay every month. From there, in office, if you ever have to cancel a transaction, you should always train your staff that they want to void the transaction rather than doing a refund. Now, there's a set period of time where you can run a void versus a refund. It's basically as long as that batch hasn't been closed, you haven't closed out the terminal for the day, or the automatic batch close hasn't happened. But if you're able to run a void, essentially what happens is the patient gets their money back sooner, so that's a win for them. But 2, you're not charged the original transaction fees. With a refund, basically the original transaction fees have already processed, and you're basically doing a separate transaction to put the money back to the account. So some credit card processors, like BestCard, doesn't charge an extra fee for that, but a lot of credit card processors actually will add in an extra fee that they charge there that, you don't have to pay if the same day the transaction needs to be voided. Now, like I said, BestCard doesn't charge for refunds ourselves. So it is a very common practice where an office might, charge $250, but then insurance pays more than previously thought, and you have to do a refund for a partial amount. Just a small note on that, but when you do that, you always want to run the refund to the original card. So our systems with our online system does that automatically. You find that prior transaction, you don't even need the card. It'll refund directly to it should you want to run a partial refund. When you're doing that, what happens is basically because it's matched to a prior sale, 1, you get a partial refund on interchange, but 2, should you ever have a patient dispute a charge, there's a transaction chain where they can see, oh yeah, here's where a refund or a void was already processed. If you try to cut a check for that refund instead, well, there's no digital chain where MasterCard can see, all right, the patient disputed this charge, but they were already paid. So you have to submit information, deal with the chargeback process, which is just an unneeded frustration for most offices. Last, PCI compliance is something that a lot of offices might have heard of, but for most offices, it's more of a pain than really realizing, what it does for them. So PCI, the best way I can describe it is it's basically HIPAA for credit cards. It says, okay, if you're taking cardholder information, we want to make sure that everything you're doing in the office is happening in a secure way. So that's making sure that your equipment and like the way that you process transactions is secure, but it's also making sure that your in-house procedures. Are you storing credit cards on a file in the office? Well, if so, that should be locked. What I will tell you, so nationwide, only 27% of businesses are PCI compliant. With specifically BestCard, we find about 65% of the dental offices that we do cost comparisons for are being charged PCI non-compliant fees. So that's an extra easily avoidable fee that ranges from $20 to I've seen as high as $125 a month. That's an extra $1,500 a year that you're paying basically for something that all you needed to do was fill out a questionnaire or possibly also do like a scan of your network to make sure that it's secure. With BestCard, that is something we walk people through like directly. So really, we don't want our offices to ever have to worry about PCI. We will walk them through the questionnaire, explaining it. If we have to run scans, we'll work directly with your IT. But that is something that you want to find a way to make sure that you are PCI compliant, regardless of who your processor is, to avoid those extra fees. So last, really at the end of the day, we always, we come from a background of being a processor that was originally created as an in-house program of the Colorado Dental Association. We're really proud that, in the last 12 years that we've been our own company, we've grown from being a single state program to now being endorsed by more than 40 state dental associations, and also endorsed by the ADA Member Advantage program. I would say, if you have a question, you're always welcome to reach out to us. When you call us, you get a live person right away. Our phone number, which is listed there, you're not going to go through a button, a phone tree with button prompts or anything like that. We know dental offices are busy. We want to help out as soon as we can if you have a problem. And we're always happy to answer questions. I mean, I work with offices all the time that don't end up coming with us, but we can at least kind of clarify parts of how like their processing works. What a lot of offices do is they will end up sending us a recent statement so that we can do really an apples to apples analysis and say, here's where your costs are coming from. Here's what we could do. And, if you have great rates, we will be the first person to say that. But at the end of the day, if there's a little bit of savings, it really can go a long way and add up over time. I mean, I was working with a doctor the other day that realized that we'd saved his office about $45,000 in the 12 years that they've been working with us. That's the conversations that we love to have, and really that's why we're the company we are. Is we really take a close look at here's exactly everything we can do for you, not have the cost go up over time, but still have that direct customer service that sometimes is lacking in other companies. So, I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have here today. But if you want to reach out to us, our information is right there. You can always find us through the TDA Perks website, and we'd love to see what we can do for you. So, Josh, do you have anything for me?
Hey, Phil, thanks so much. That was great. And we just appreciate the job that you and the BestCard team does for TDA members. Just unbelievable, bend over backwards, member support, and we really appreciate that. It does look like I have a few questions that have been. So question one, Phil, what notification does my processor need to give me to raise my cost above what's on my contract?
So that is actually a really good question, because I can't tell you the number of offices that didn't even realize that it was possible for somebody to raise their costs. To me, you sign a contract, it seems like something that should just go forward. Really, all they have to do is put in a notice in the fine print of their monthly statements. Sometimes those are very vague, just saying, due to card brand changes, there may be differences in fees assessed in next month. Well, that doesn't tell you what they're going to raise it to, but that really is sufficient for some processors to, have a justification for raising the rates and fees. Other times they may not do it in like a statement notice. They can send a letter, but they have to give you notice in some way. Now, whether or not that's easy to parse is kind of a different, unfortunately, like conversation. I can tell you with BestCard, we've never had a rate increase notice on our Interchange Plus pricing in our entire company history. We've been doing this for 12 years. It's kind of one of the things we take pride in, that when you sign up, it's, what you sign up at is still the rate that you pay years and years later. But with a lot of credit card processors, it is one of those things where those small notices will be in like the fine print of a statement, and all you know at the end of the day is you end up paying more than you had been previously. So you can always check statement notices. They're normally in like a separate box on the statement. But that is also something that, we notice fairly often when we do those cost analyses. We tend to see about, every 3 to 4 months, the average credit card processor raises rates and fees. So it is something to definitely keep an eye out for, and checking your statement is the best way to find that.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Again, great question. We've got another one here. We tried to switch processors, but we were told we were in a contract that ended up being too expensive to cancel. Are there any options to get out of this?
It kind of depends on the contract. Unfortunately, credit card processing isn't really a very regulated industry. So I have seen the craziest contract I've ever seen. An office wanted to switch back to us. They left us. The cost ended up being much higher than they were told they would be. So they wanted to come back within 3 to 4 months, and they were told that their early termination fee was $107,000. It's crazy. Unfortunately, just different processors can institute very expensive contract early termination fees. Generally speaking, I'm always happy to kind of review and help out if you have something like that you want me to look at. But normally those contracts come up for renewal at certain times. Now, sometimes those processors will carry through that early termination fee into a new term. Sometimes it's only for the initial term of the agreement. So it really can change a lot from month to month. It's one of those questions, though, we always tell people. Be very direct in asking and making sure you get a direct answer to this question, because we have seen some very expensive early termination fees. Just to give you an idea, from BestCard, we have a one-time early termination fee of $25 in the first 3 years of our agreement. After 3 years, there's no cost to close. Kind of the rationale for us is we'd always like to be, the lowest price and best customer service solution. We want to earn your business. A lot of credit card processors, like I said, they sign you up at an initially low rate, but raise it up and then kind of rely on the fact that it's either too expensive to leave or just expensive enough to stay. Either way, they're making more money. Really that's not, how we were founded as a company. That's really not how we like to, do business with our dental offices. So it's a really good question, but it changes so much from contract to contract.
Okay, Phil. Got another
Anything
question
else?
here.
Okay.
Yes, we do actually, Phil. So here's a question from a member. So my office is a startup still in the construction phase.
Okay.
Where do I start from getting more information on BestCard and options available for my upcoming office? So probably just a great idea just to give them that number.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say giving us a call is the easiest way. Give us a call. We'll walk you through it. What I will tell you is timeline-wise, kind of what you want to plan for. If you're still in the construction phase, generally speaking, say hypothetically you wanted to sign up with us, we could get an account live usually within 2 to 3 business days and then send out equipment the same day that the account is live. So within a week, it's pretty common that we can get you set up. But we never want to get you set up months in advance, because we pay on-file fees for every account. We don't want to charge you for a service you're not using. So when you start to get to the end of that, phase, call us right now, honestly. We'll get everything squared away. But as far as getting the actual, account started, that is something that we will plan for right around the time that you guys are getting started. And we usually give ourselves 2 weeks, from when you're starting is when we like to do it. So that way the 1 week time, in case FedEx misses a shipping label or something, we can always, make sure that we have you set up and it's a smooth transition. Generally, getting set up is something that should be really easy. And one of the things that we'll look at, when you reach out to us is, how do you want to run cards in the office? We have a lot of different options. Obviously, there's different costs depending on what you're trying to do. But at the end of the day, the difference in cost is really on the equipment side. We want to make sure that as you're getting set up, it's something that's going to work for your office and be streamlined going forward. All the time, we have offices that, the business gets busier later on, and then they really want to go to some of our more streamlined solutions like our online system. But give us a call. We'll walk through kind of all the options and see what really is the best fit for you guys. And, from there, we just love the chance to talk to you and, share what we can do. We have pricing of interchange plus 0.3%. So we pass through that base cost, and then we basically make, $3 for every $1,000 that you run in credit cards. The average processor makes about 4 times that, and we really take pride in having, consistently low rates. So yeah, our phone number is 877-739-3952, and we'd be, love to see what we could do for you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Phil. And congratulations, Dr. Saab. It's great news that you're in the construction phase and starting your practice. If there's ever anything you need regarding starting your practice or anything going forward, you call me anytime. And that's 512-443-3675, extension 161 at the TDA. And again, tdaperks.com would be able to, take a look at all of our endorsed vendors like BestCard. So Phil, looks like we've got one more question here.
Okay.
I use a company that manages billing for my membership plans, but the costs are very expensive. Yeah. Can those be set up as recurring payments?
Yes. So that is actually something that our recurring payments actually incorporates the ability to set up those plans, which is something that a lot of dental offices really love because, if you're trying to get a reliable patient base, having somebody that's going to be in every 6 months for their treatment because it's part of their, membership plan is a very, very popular kind of business model a lot of offices are looking at. With BestCard, basically, we have the ability to set that up as part of the normal, payment modules. We don't charge an extra fee. Like I say, if you're using our online system, it's built in, just like the website payments, we're happy to do free of charge. Now, I've talked to offices, there's a lot of different companies that are kind of moving into that space, and sometimes the cost can be very, very high. We had an office the other day that was paying 5% and then of the total of fees, and then also a $199 sign-up fee for each patient. So really, at the end of the day, that's not something you have to pay an arm and a leg for, especially for just the billing part of it. If you want to give us a call, we can go through more detailed methods, but we even have the ability where patients can sign up for each of those recurring plans on your website, and it's automatically taken as a recurring payment. That is something that we've done a lot of work for the last couple of years because we really try to fit the needs of our dentists. So that is not something that you should feel like you have to pay a huge premium for sure.
Excellent. And thanks so much, Phil. We really appreciate the information today, and thanks everyone for being with us. Again, just going to say one more time, you can call me at the TDA anytime. Again, it's Josh Epstein. I'm the marketing specialist. My number there is 512-443-3675, extension 161. And just, feel free to take a look at all of our endorsed vendors on the Perks website, tdaperks.com. Phil, we really appreciate everything again. And is there anything else you want to add before we go?
No, I just say, there's a lot of options in the industry, and we really pride ourselves on being the best. We try to really be something that dentists can utilize to keep their costs down. So
Definitely.
We'd love to work with anyone, but otherwise, I'm always available to answer questions. Feel free to ask for me when you call our number, and they'll put you right through to me.
Awesome. Well, again, appreciate everyone being with us. Thanks again, Phil. Everyone have a great weekend. Stay safe and take care.
All right. Thanks, Josh.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.